When I just read about like the two-parent household
Yeah.
building wealth, like it wasn't the same poverty stories. That was
Yes.
like, wow, this exists and they're in love and they're raising children. Oh, wow.
I'm Leon Davis, and this is One Good Question. Hello, and welcome to another episode of One Good Question. I'm your host, Leon Davis. We're in the middle of, maybe at the end of, but who really knows, of the never-ending spring break. I hope everyone's doing well sheltering in place or quarantining, however you may define that. I'm doing well here, living in Texas. We're getting ready to open back up, so we will see how that goes. My guest today is Nadine Frye. She's a young author that writes in the African-American fiction genre. She specializes in romance and erotica. Her latest book, Fetish, Hold Me in the Dark, debuted in Amazon at number 2 in African-American erotica and number 2 overall BDSM erotica. We didn't talk a lot about her book, but we talked mostly about the way she uses her characters and their frailties to talk about relationships and brokenness and the ways to overcome them. We also spoke about the authors who have inspired her throughout her career and how the words from those authors have also led her to speak to her community through her pen. I enjoyed the conversation. She left us with some great things to think about. So let me go ahead and get you to Nadine Frye answering her one good question. Hey Nadine, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, really well. I bet you're doing well. We saw that your new book, Fetish, is on the bestsellers list.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
It is. It is like such a surreal moment.
Glad to hear that. We'll talk about that more here in a little bit. How's social distancing been treating you?
Oh, it's definitely social distancing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's fine. I think that when it comes to social distancing, it's like you find people who love to be with their families, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people who can't deal with the pressure. But it's been a joy. We've had our hiccups. The children are home from
Yes.
school. Let's talk about that. Like the children
that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. The children are definitely home from school. It's like you learn a different appreciation for teachers and all that they do.
Yes.
And the school system. So like just having that one-on-one with them every day has been definitely a learning experience.
Yes. Yeah. Same here in our house. So we got 4 of them running around, 3 of them in school. So.
Oh.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and ask you your question. All right.
Okay.
All right. When I spoke to you earlier, we talked a little bit about the lineage of Black female writers that had come before you in the urban romance genre. Can you tell me about what they meant to you when you began writing, and what, from the standpoint of community, do you want to communicate to the culture at large through your writing?
I think that as an African-American little girl growing up in America, it's like you never really know what's out in the world. So, when I came up on like the greats, like, people like Danielle Steele, Nora Roberts, and things like that. So I think I had to be in middle school when I discovered that there were like Black women writing about Black love. And it just opened my horizons to that. So my favorite romance author is Brenda Jackson. I had the opportunity to read the Madeira saga that runs over like maybe 15 or 20 books, and then there's a bunch of spinoffs. But when I just read about like the two-parent household building wealth, like it wasn't the same poverty stories. That was like, wow, this exists and they're in love and they're raising children. Oh, wow. Like they own company. And then it just like got into other topics like generational wealth. And I've been a lover of reading, but I've been writing for a very long time. Started out with poetry, little short stories. When they had little contests in elementary, middle, and in high school, I always entered. So it was just like that joy, but to see the other aspect of my everyday living. Because, you grew up in the inner city. I had a stepfather when I was coming up. That was my father figure. So I had the experience of the two-parent home, but I've also experienced my mother doing it on her own. strong Black woman, has mouth to feed,
Yes.
has children to raise, has children to teach. And then it was like not uncommon to the stories that I saw pervade in my own neighborhood. So when you read those books, it just gives you like this idea of brighter days. And I said, wow, like if I ever decided to write, I wanted to do just that, because it's like reading people like Brenda Jackson, Frances Ray, Leslie Dial, reading ladies like those where they talked about marriage in full. You get what I'm saying? It's like, it wasn't like it was without its issues, but like talking about the importance of education and Black children. You know what I mean? That was like the first time I had ever seen that. And that was like my driving force. And I said, if I ever became a writer, that I wanted to honor that idea. So when it comes to my books, you'll find children who are very forward thinking, very innovative. They use their mind. They have parents who care about, even if we are in this circumstance, this is not your circumstance. I want you to have better. And to do that, you have to teach the children better. That was, like my driving force. I love Black love. I love it because, I live it. I breathe it. Being a mother, being a wife, raising a family together. You get what I'm saying? It's like, that is something very special all in itself. But it's like you read a lot of stories in a genre and I just get tired of seeing broken homes, like I like, because it's not all we are, and that's like one of the biggest misconceptions about us as a people. We don't have no family. We have no culture. We don't leave our children anything but debt and heartache. It's like, if I could do anything to kind of combat those ideals, even if it's just people read my story and they go home and implement the little jewel, eating dinner together, keeping your marriage spicy. It's like, just because you're married and you have children, we all get into that little rough patch where it's like, oh, all we are parents, but you forget that this is your lover, this is your friend. You get what I'm saying? So it's like showing people how to take the time to sit down and have a conversation, do things, even if it's just in the house. Put the children to bed early. Get your favorite blanket. Watch a movie. I try to leave lasting impressions that people can take away and use as either conversational pieces or use as inspiration.
It's still disheartening that we still don't hear a lot of that in 2020 in our community, and there aren't those stories told on a wider basis.
Yeah, my personal mantra is that I am an author. I have no box or genre. That means that I write what I feel, and I try to use my writing as teachable moments. Like, I deal with a lot of the issues that have been plaguing us in our Black familial structures. You know what I mean? Starting with our men. You get what I'm saying? Yes. Starting with our women, showing a woman that you can have independence, but when it comes to this cohesive unit, you get what I'm saying? You have to be able to lean on someone. When I think about when I write, I always want to have some type of message. Whether it's an issue that you may face on an everyday basis, how do you face it? How do you deal with it? People think marriage, love, and when people read, yes, they want the happily ever after, but I give the happily ever after, but I feel like you have to deal with the obstacles, the hills you have to climb, like the work you have to do to capture and cultivate love and keep it consistent. Keep it cohesive. Those type of things are what I dream of when I bring to a story. I have characters that are not conventional. Like, I talk about, like, when I say like a wide range of things, a wide range of topics, because it's something for everybody inside of one of my books. It's like, I don't just talk about the successful doctor and lawyer. I love the opposites that attract,
Yeah,
I love when opposites attract, because it'll be like, how do you get here from here? You know what I mean? Like, how do you get from the street pharmacist to someone who literally is an LVN? You get what I'm saying? It's like, how do you blend the two? It's like, I like the fact that opposite attract, because, love doesn't really have how do you say it doesn't have like
a
I can't say
formula.
it doesn't have a formula,
Yeah.
like so when it happens, it's like, woo, you could be different cultures, different thinkings, different ideals. When it comes to the basis of it, your soul calls to one another. So you reach for that. So then when you have these opposites, how do you blend your lives? And then that's when I introduced this concept that's very common, but we don't take seriously. And that's compromise. Compromise. It's like, it's a word, and it's almost like a dirty, naughty word, when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, nobody else wants to compromise. You want the other person to compromise, but you don't want to
compromise always ends up turning into this one-sided affair. It takes a family to keep a home.
Yes.
So that means that I don't want to just be forced into this, oh, you just cook, you just clean, that's your job. I go out, I'm He-Man, I make the money, I'm coming back home.
Yes.
That doesn't work for me. And then being a creative, I don't keep traditional hours because I have to get my best writing done after the little noo-noos are in bed. Yeah. So I have to find time to be this creative individual. And inside of that is like a loss of identity. So, that word compromise, like, be like, compromise? Whatever do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to just give because that's what it sounds like. No, compromise is finding where you are at the end of the spectrum, where you are at the other end, and then figuring out how to meet in the middle.
Yep. You have to find the right partner for that.
You do. Like, that is so essential. People think that I'm crazy, but I tell people it doesn't take you years to choose a life partner. You can literally figure that out in about 90 days. Like, you can literally run through, how are you with your family? Like, the things that are important to you, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The things that are important to you in your foundation, if you find that, you can build from it. Everybody's personal foundation is different, but it doesn't take years and years and years and years of, getting into a routine before you figure out, hey, no, we should just go ahead on and do the right thing. Let's just get married and build a life, because it's like when you try to do it outside of their sanctity, when you try to do it outside of that, it ends up being like, well, we already do that. So it becomes like a non-important thing. But it's like when you find your helpmeet, you'll know. I've always talked about communication being everything. I'm like, hey, if you don't like me on Thursdays, tell me what you didn't like. Maybe I won't do that thing again. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. If we ever, because, love comes around in cycles. It's up, it's down. I always say to him, if I'm not meeting your standard or expectation, I'm okay with you coming to me like, hey, these are the things that I notice. These are the things that I don't like. And because I'm committed to building our family, I will take an introspective look at your concerns and I will mold myself around it. It could be something as simple as, oh, well, I don't like when you wear your hair like that. That's fine with me because guess what? You got to look at me forever. So I want you to be happy. Like, I want you to be pleased. Or, hey, I didn't like that color. I'm like a real big communicator because I feel like that's the thing that happens. People suppress. So those are the things that I like to talk about in a marriage. Things that seem small to other people. Because unless it has anything to do with like financial infidelity, you get what I'm saying? People can't relate, but you don't know like the small things in the house, like when a person is breathing wrong or they put that shoe on that way. And it's like, why you got to do that like that? I like to dig into those little things because it becomes realism. People see that and they're like, yeah, I totally get that. That makes it, because, when you write a story, the biggest thing that we worry about as authors is how it's going to be purveyed. Are they going to judge it? Will they understand the deeper message? Like, will it be something that speaks to a certain person but can be enjoyed by everybody? People think that authors just sit in front of a computer and they just get to banging on the keys and then magic happens. No. what about when you're writing and you are on the second paragraph and it's like you've been writing for 4 hours and you probably only produced 800 words because guess what? You're having a conversation
Yeah.
with this person. It's like, like you're having a conversation with this character. You connect with them, and they're like, yeah, I don't think I really want to do that. And then, but you're like, no, but we got to make it for the people. And then it's like you get the backspace and, it's like, or the research. People, really judge your book by how authentic it is. Like there are certain things that I won't write about in depth. Things like maybe drugs. I don't write about that in depth because I don't really know about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can remember a time in my life where I wrote something in the book and it was like, excuse me, I think that was like too much cocaine that they use. And I'm like, what? I mean, this is all I've ever heard it be, but it's like, but they check for that type of stuff.
Yeah, if you're going to use it. People that have lived it are like, that's not right.
Yeah. So that's what it's like, it's like things that like I can connect to. I've had a very full like work, like it's been colorful. I've traveled, I've met different people. I was the child that loved to sit with like the elderly women and men in my neighborhood and get them talking about what life was. You get them talking about them being in the peanut fields and the tobacco field, especially like with my grandparents and stuff. So that was like just being, like a good storyteller, blending your experiences into a common experience for your readers. Like when I approach certain subjects, I'm always nervous. So like when I wrote Fetish, this is like the first erotica that I've written.
Yeah.
And most eroticas are really just like sex, 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 more sex, and then we're going to do more sex. My brain doesn't work like that because I feel like in anything, again, we're back to teachable moment. It's like I use erotica as the vehicle to kind of discuss different manners in which a person tries to use certain things to control that uncontrollable feeling. But it's like imagining that feeling and then being a man with how society tells men that they shouldn't cry. They're not supposed to feel. They're supposed to be Hercules, always strong, always valiant, chest out, chin up. That's what they expect from men. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it causes men who suppress their feelings, don't know how to communicate, become the very thing that's eating them alive inside. Unnecessary anger, not being able to connect with another individual, where they have this sense to like try to control themselves because at that time when they felt vulnerable, they were torn down, So it's like I try to use certain things as just vehicles to get the message across. And I deal with some very hard subjects, but guess what? These subjects are so important because I love our men. And I feel like we have to love them in abundance. And when we don't, we find ourselves the men who can't express or are afraid. Like, I think the saddest thing is a man who doesn't understand that there's a time for tears.
Yeah.
He doesn't feel comfortable crying. Something can hurt him, and you ever just saw a man just like suck it in because they don't want to be viewed as weak. When from my studies, I've come to find out tears are necessary in cleansing yourself of negative emotion. Can you imagine a man that's like, I ain't cried since I was 6.
Yeah.
And you like, brother, like, let me give you a hug. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let me give you a hug. Let me show you some love, because pressure bursts pipes. You suppress it, eventually you're going to have a breaking point. And then sometimes we're not happy with the breaking point. It's like, that's just what I aspire to be. But it all leads back to those that came before me. And it's just like, you open that and then you have people like Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, people that have given us different flavors and showed us. That's why like Leslie is Dial, she's my favorite author of all time because she did something in like paranormal and fantasy I've never read paranormal or fantasy until I read her work. Never have I ever. But it just showed me that your mind is limitless. And I was like, oh, I have to be able to do that. So that's why, like, I try not to categorize myself as any one thing, but I'm learning in branding yourself. You kind of have to have a lane that people are comfortable with you being in, so that when you go skirt to the right, they like, oh, we gonna read that because we know you about to come with it, you know? So
Yeah.
being a contemporary romance author, that universe is built, steeped in happily ever after.
Yeah.
No matter what breaks you down in the middle, that's the end goal. So it's like that blank canvas leads my mind to like so many different things and many different possibilities. And I just try to be as authentic as I can. I plan for things generally, but most of the time, I really like to just throw just a little curveball there that'll change the whole dynamic of the series, but it'll change it to give it depth. And I can only pray that like I'm paying homage to those great Black women that came before me and held this up on their shoulder, especially in a game where it was male dominated for a great many a year, like until the 90s.
Yeah.
When we started getting like Harlequin novels, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, like when they really let us, you know, venture off and come through. Those were like just classics to me, like stories I still read. I think I read the Madeira saga every other year because it's a starting point for me. And then now that I'm in this beautiful book world, it's like, wow, you're here. And then you get to learn the other side. And it's just like, man, it just gives you a different appreciation for what they bring to you. And it just like, dang, were there times in my life where I was way too critical? You know, where I was way too critical of my authors, because like now that I'm an author and I understand the craziness that you go through just to build a good story. But those were the things that really gave me hope and gave me purpose, to see someone with my skin tone, to see someone that wasn't afraid to test the boundaries. Like Brenda Jackson, she was just so sensual in her language. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the language in her books was just like, wow, without being like overtly crass. It's like she built sensuality. And it's like, oh my word, I didn't even know that existed with us, you know?
Yeah.
And she's talking about it with people who've been married 40 years, whether they the newlyweds on the scene. Just building that. She wasn't afraid of spice, but telling it in a manner that was poetic. And that's important to me. I love words, love deep conversation. And Miss Jackson, I just love it. I said, I just want to meet her one day. And I just hope that I can meet. I would like to meet her. Because, you know, Leslie is Dial, you know, L.A. Banks.
Yeah.
She passed away a few years ago. And I'm like, oh, man, yeah, I have to get somewhere so that I can meet my favorite authors and hug them at least one time before, you know, their time expires. Everybody doesn't live forever, you know. But that's just like just my biggest dreams, you know. But all I hope for as an author is the same way that it sparked love, understanding, made me look at relationships differently. Like with Brenda Jackson, she always had like, it's always a critical point in a relationship that can make or break it. She even talk about people who go missing from each other's lives for years, come back and there's a baby, and now they have to deal with that reality. And with that reality becomes betrayal. It's like those things that she introduced. It was like, oh man, you know, like, oh, it's not just I love you forever. Like, no, you got to work for this love. And I love that. Like Mary B. Morrison, she did something with erotica that no one was doing, because she used her scientific knowledge to build these great stories with women who were liberated in their sexuality. you can't do nothing but love it. It's those type of things, So I love those that came before me because it gave me a standard to live by, but it didn't lock me in this cage where I can't reach out. I'm not going to just talk about the trap kings and queens because it's so much more that goes on in the inner city,
Yeah.
it's other things you could talk about. I was thinking about how I grew up on the block where you knew that this lady was boosting, but ain't nobody care. She was the hood's store. That was our Walmart. Okay. Yeah. That's our Walmart. And we went there. Listen, that was her hustle. And guess who we spent our money with? People don't think about that. Urban has a tendency to become redundant.
Yeah.
But with romance, a fairy tale can be whatever you make it. Like I just wrote one, that North Philly Hood Love. And one of the biggest issues in that book was like a husband and wife who kind of built their family from being orphans, which is something that happens in the city. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what happens when you put each other up on these high pedestals, and then when that person fails, it's like, oh, wow, like just everything I knew in reality is destroyed. Like that type of thing. Like, oh no, you can tell Urban in many different ways. People just don't reach past that because they know what to sell. I'm confident in my ability to show you some hood love.
Yeah.
A little urban razzle dazzle. And I have you thinking. One thing that I did with that North Philly Hood Love, I promised that in this 55,000 word book, I was going to teach my people a bunch of new words. And I said that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I chose words that gave it a stronger, deeper meaning. And that's what a lot of my readers were drawn to. They was like, wow, like your language, your wordplay. Yeah. Because language breaks barriers. That's important to me. But Brenda Jackson, I promise you, she uplifted my vocabulary so deeply. I wrote poetry before that point. Like when I really got into her, just the words she used. Like when I would read her books, I kept the thesaurus near me. Because when a word came up, I needed to know, like what is the simplistic word for that? Oh, so instead of saying this, so then it's like I just started changing the way that I talk to people. I didn't want to be that person that was like overbearing, use a bunch of big words, but I like to do things that spark conversation. And I have a very great family that, hey, if I say a word, and they'll be like, what does it mean? Well, this word means, and say it with me,
Yeah. Yeah. I lived in it. My mom was a little bit different. I was like, hey, what's that word mean? She's like, hey, go grab that dictionary off the
shelf. Yeah. Yeah. See, my thing is, my mom, I was so quiet as a child. I didn't necessarily like to be outside, and stuff like that. I literally always got lost inside of a book. I've been reading since I was about 4. And when my mom found out, like, oh, the child can read. Okay. And that's when the encyclopedias came. That's when the National Geographic books came.
Yeah.
That's when she started challenging my thinking. By the time I was 13, I had read the dictionary front to back at least 5 times.
Yeah.
Like it was so important to me because I love words. I grew up on the Babysitters Club. Like those type of books. I grew up on Addie, Goosebumps.
Yeah.
I grew up. Oh my God, the American Girl series. I grew up on all of that. My mom loved mystery, thriller. She loved those type of books. So there was always a Stephen King something in the house, and there was always something from John Grisham. The Client was such a big book, and I was so hyped to finish it, but it was just his words, the way he broke the story down, like that was important. And what I didn't know, I looked for it. That is the type of thing that I want to inspire in my own children. It's nothing like a good book. Nothing like a good book. I've had like many phases in life, and what I read really goes in cycles, But it's like when I was coming up, I was really big into like historical romances. I love things that are set in a time that came before me that can kind of give me an idea. of what the world was like then. I loved romance. Danielle Still, she's like as vanilla as you can get with romance, where she introduces innuendo. And it's like, I didn't understand it when I was a child. But when I got older, it's like, aha, I saw what she was doing there. I'm telling you, like, just the diversity, in reading. And, I feel like all of those experiences helped me be the author that I am.
I remember when we first talked, so I was telling you, I don't read romance, but I was like, maybe I need to pick up one of her books.
I promise you, listen, I promise you. I tell people all the time, and it's crazy because like when men come and ask me about a book, I tell them, hey, if you're in a relationship, read I Love Him, But My Soul Craves Another, 1 and 2. Read it with your wife.
Okay.
Use it as a date night. And because it's like, it's so much in that book that would spark conversation. You know what I mean? Like, hey, if we were ever here and we hit this plateau, what can we do not to go to the left or to the right? When you get married, people just be like, the battle axe, the ball and chain, the redundancy, monotony. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do? Why wouldn't you wake your love up with raspberries, on the face, like, hey, boo, like, hey, did I tell you that I loved you today? Because, when you get on in years in marriage, the I love yous are few and far between. Just like, hey, but did I tell you that I love you today? And you're like, okay, what do you want, woman? Nothing. I just want you.
It's like the automatic response is like, what do you want?
I just want you to know that I love you. You're awesome. But it's like, you just never want to stop showing appreciation for each other. There are times where, like, say if I'm thinking about something deep or something heavy or a subject in my book, I'll say, hey, what's your take on this? Because I'm a woman and I can say what I think a man would say or feel or act or purvey, but I ask them. And then it's just like we go back and forth and we bounce ideas off of each other. Well, maybe they don't do that. Maybe it can go this because, I love the shock because I never like to have the answer to any question just right there. I like to take people through many different outcomes and I choose the outcome that would probably take the hardest get back. People like, oh, because if he cheat on me, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave and he's going to be by himself. But guess what? That ain't usually how it happens, though. Cheating takes you through stages. You women take it very seriously. You know what I mean? Whereas though sometimes for men, it's not even as deep as we think. We done wasted 8 nights of berating ourselves. And what didn't I give him? And what didn't I do? You know what I mean? And for a man, it's like, oh, I had opportunity. And it presented itself. And then you'd be like, but wait a minute, you had, well, when did you have the time? And that's what you starts going crazy, but I was like, I like to talk about those things. What are the limits? Because everybody's limits ain't the same.
Yeah.
The destruction of a relationship, marriage, it's not single-sided. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What can I do more? Do I not praise you enough? Do I not, you get what I'm saying? Love you enough? Do I not show you enough appreciation? Do you not think that I'm grateful for all that you do, for all that you are? So once we go through that and you're like, no. Okay, so what's wrong with you? So what can we do for you to get you to not want that? I always feel like love is just like not this perfect institution. You got to go through some things. What about women? Can we take accountability for the fact that our men don't feel loved, that they don't feel appreciated? I get a lot of flack for that. Well, how often does that really happen to men? I don't care how often it happens or doesn't happen to men. How often do they talk about it? So maybe now because I brought it to the light, they want to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Like me, I'm so fair, and I'm so neutral because there are things that hurt women that men don't know. I talk about them. Most men have to go through that phase where they understand that, like, what they taught you about being a man sometimes ain't gonna go with your personal journey, your personal walk into the man that you hope to become. So it's like when you think about that, it's like a man learns a little later than women. because we usually see examples of how women take care of men. It's the give and take, not to make it personal, But I remember one of the things that my husband said, because, I'm from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The women there are kind of like really brash and abrasive. And I can remember at a pivotal moment in my marriage, my husband just being like, I just didn't feel like you needed me. I just felt like you were so closed off. I just got used to saying, you know what, just let her deal with it herself. And it's just like, in a woman, it's like, well, but I needed you, It's like, but you didn't convey that you needed me. You know what I mean? Because all you would tell me was, well, I'm good. I don't care. You get what I'm saying? Well, I can go. That was my thing. And that comes from years of being bitter, because every relationship ain't the same. Like those are the type of things that I like to talk about. Literally most things you can work through, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a marriage,
Yeah.
The end goal is, this is my family. That's my husband. I stood before God, and I promised to love you. And if we promise to do that, then we need to work within those parameters. Those are the type of things that I love to do as an author. That's the type of experience I try to give my readers. When they open up a book, I want them to feel so connected with me. You wouldn't believe how many stories I've heard, when my readers just come and just say, hey, I just had to let you know I read such and such book and I felt it. Because sometimes people just want an avenue to discuss their lives. And I try to be as accessible as possible between me going underground and trying to write these books. Because, like I told you earlier, I have these 5 open projects.
Yeah.
I do, I have things because the pressure is on, those 5 projects are going to kind of lead me into later in the year, about maybe October-ish.
Yeah.
And then and I want to say that when I take my break, it'll be probably around September. And then it'll be me gearing up for 2021, and the things that are going to come and the things that I want to focus on and the things that I want to do. For the rest of the year, I think I'm going to drop maybe 8 or 9 new projects. I know that I'm closing a series very soon. And I've just started a new collaboration with someone. Those books are coming soon, but I just want to explore what I can do,
Yeah.
with this little gift of mine. If you don't mind, I'll take a moment to shout out my publisher, Misha Mish. She is just so awesome, and when I started with her just in September, and I remember her telling me that if you take the critiques, you apply them, and you take all the tools that I'm giving you, I guarantee you that you will elevate your pen, and mind you, I have been doing this for almost 3 years before her and I linked up. You get what I'm saying? And literally, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th book I dropped with her hit the bestsellers list, but I understood exactly what she was pushing me to. And I'm so grateful for a woman like her who doesn't mind taking the hand of her authors and showing, this is the game, this is what works, this is how you brand, promote, giving us different tools, showing us how to interact with our readers. It's everything that she shows, so she doesn't just throw you to the wolves. Her whole goal is to make you independent, make you able to take control of your life as an author. And I value her so much for that. And just be on the lookout for Misha Mish present. My Pen Sisters are just going to be coming with it this year.
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Let's go to the house question. So tell me one piece of advice that you received and didn't take, but looking back on, you wish you would have taken the first time you got it.
The best piece of advice that I've ever gotten was that don't be afraid to try new things when you're writing. Because when I first came out, I tried to stick to the standard and the cookie cutter of what was already out here. And I was taught, overstand on your work. You know what I mean? Yes, for marketability, you want your work to be something that can be promoted. But understand that if you believe in what you write, they will believe in what you write. So that was the best piece of advice. And it's a piece of advice that I give new authors that reach out to me. stand on your story. Understand that. Don't be afraid to write something, because the greatest story is the one that hasn't been written.
Yep. Very nice. Very nice. That's a good one. Wow. You've dropped some gems on us today.
I did. I hope it wasn't going too heavy, but
No.
but my thing is, being an author just shows you different things. It gives you just a different appreciation for things. And like I said, when people talk, discuss, and I hope when they listen to this, that they have things that they can take away, because that's important. Just always having something to take away, because I always say that if I feel like I can inspire conversation, if I can inspire people to start opening their mouths and communicating, then I feel like I've done what I've needed to do as an author.
Well, awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for the time you've given us today. I really, really do appreciate your time. I want to, hold on, wait for that. I really appreciate it. I look forward to watching your growth over this year and going forward. And,
I do, and I hope that we can do this again.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're gonna have to link back up when my podcast gets a little bit bigger, and you're selling 1 million books. We're gonna have to link back up and look back and see where everything is. Right.
I'll definitely enjoy that.
So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So that was Nadine Frye answering her one good question. All right, thank you for joining me for another episode of One Good Question. That was author Nadine Frye. You can check her out on Twitter at author Nadine. Once again, that's at author Nadine. And you can buy our books on Amazon. I will leave a link to both. Make sure to check out the episode I dropped last Friday of One Good Question, Tables Turned with Matt Hongoltz-Hetling. This is a part of the series where former guests get to ask me a question. Right now, it's being released on a bi-weekly basis until I get enough content to release weekly. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please just share it with one other person. Be safe out there, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. This has been One Good Question. Once again, I'm your host, Leon Davis. Theme music by DJ Seth Lowry. Other music courtesy of Epidemic Sound. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you may listen. To catch up with us on social, check the show notes.